Hello everyone. Today we are going to talk about the key and most important issue when it comes to writing your term papers or master's thesis in EcoS, and that is finding a good topic and research question. We will discuss what a good topic and what a good research question actually means, look at some types of research questions, provide some examples as well. I'll make some additional remarks and recommendations, and we will conclude by looking at the standard EcoS grading form. Just to remind you where we stand in terms of your whole research project, we are actually at the very beginning here. Remember, we divided this into three parts. So we are in the theoretical part, we are in the introduction now, where you basically tell the reader what the whole research, the whole thesis, the whole paper will be all about. So let's start with a good topic or title. Actually, there are alternative terms here, and you will see that's how I use them as well. Topic, title, or research aim. Not research question, that's a different thing, but the research aim or goal or something. That's what we are talking about here. In a way, it's the thing that appears on the cover page of your term paper or master's thesis. The title of your thesis is more or less your topic in the form of a headline. And remember, a headline, like a headline in a newspaper, it's something that's supposed to be understandable. It's something that's supposed to attract the attention of your readers and viewers. And that's what you should also be aiming for. Obviously, the topic or title should fit the seminar or the EcoS MA program, depending on whether it's a thesis or a term paper. And it should include East Asian content, either the whole region of East Asia, sub-regions of East Asia, like South China Sea, for example, or Northeast Asia, or at least one East Asian country for a term paper, and at least two East Asian countries for a master's thesis. Your topic or title gives a very clear and general understanding of the broader topic to be covered. Look at the term clear. I just made that point before. It needs to be understandable and general in the sense that you shouldn't go into too much detail. That's what you can do in your research question, which is not the same as the title or topic of your paper, right? I recommend a division of labor between title and research question, actually. That means that you also shouldn't really forcefully try to cram everything, the whole paper, into one long and complicated sentence. Again, this will not really be helpful in terms of reaching your readers. Um, the choice of topic should probably also make some strategic sense. It doesn't have to, but it's a strong recommendation I would like to make. And strategy we can look at in two different ways at least. One is looking backwards at your past, and one is looking ahead, looking at your future. If we look at your past, we talk about building on some existing skills or knowledge. I mean, it's not like you came here with no previous education, right? You all have already at least a BA degree. Some of you have more than one bachelor's degree. Some of you have master's degrees already, which means that you already know something. You acquired academic knowledge. You acquired technical skills. You did research on particular issues. Try to incorporate that. In italics, I have this example here of cutting down a tree with an axe. You typically would do that by hitting the same spot multiple times rather than hitting a different spot each time. This will not help you in felling the tree, right? And for yourself, that also might be a good strategy. Keep working on the same issue, thereby improving yourself, adding new facets, going deeper, improving the quality of your work, and that will, at the end of the day, be probably a successful strategy for you. Such existing skills or knowledge can, for example, it really depends on who you are, right, and on your own past, but it could be some quantitative method. Like if you're good at statistics, if you already mastered some statistics software, then why not applying it? If you have experience conducting surveys and you learned a lot from doing that the last time, why not doing it again and this time doing it better or doing it with less effort because you already know how it works? And if you've already written something on a certain topic, why not trying to keep writing on the same topic without plagiarizing yourself, of course, but you can still discover new aspects or go deeper or something. By the way, this is also possible in the relationship between your own term papers and master's thesis. You can, I strongly support actually students in their attempts to write on the same topic in the master's thesis, the same topic they covered in the term papers already. Again, you're not talking about plagiarizing yourself. You talk about improving your research and building on existing strength, right? Um, Another thing to consider is probably unique access. Again, it doesn't happen for everyone, but it might be the case. Unique access to data and information. Let's just assume your parents own an Asian restaurant in Vienna. I mean, that's a fantastic way to access data. You can talk to the employees, you can talk to the owners, you can talk to the guests, and you can do that in a way that few other people could because you have this unique access by having a family relationship to the owners, right? Another option would be that you already had an internship somewhere and that gives you access to a certain company, or you might come from a particular country where you speak the language, where you have access to sources that many other people don't have. We have a very international student body, so that might apply to you as well. So please look at yourself and ask yourself, what is my unique um, asset, skill set, access to information that I have? Interestingly, very often we aren't even aware of that because for us it's normal. So you might even engage in some conversation with people who know you and ask them, looking at me, what do you think is unique about my skill set or access to information? Probably that will help. The other way of being strategic in your choice of topic would be to look ahead. Again, you need to be careful here, and it doesn't really apply to all of you, but of course, it could be that you already think about the potential job application. You already know that you want to work in a particular company, in a particular organization, and here we really need to make a difference between assumptions and knowledge. Assuming that they will love you to have written a thesis on this or that topic might not be enough, but it could be that you already had an internship or something and they told you that, huh, um, if you write a master's thesis on this or that, this would actually be something that would really improve your chances in an application process. Or we only hire people who have a certain command of a particular software, and then you probably would like to use that in your master's thesis to be um, efficient, kind of killing two birds with one stone or something like that. So please at least have in mind that a choice of topic for your term paper or master's thesis can also be based on some strategic considerations, not just on some momentary short-term things to consider. I have a few examples here. I think they explain themselves, so I just move over to the next slide. Yeah, I don't think I can really emphasize this often enough, and you will hear me saying this many, many more times, or probably you heard me saying this already before. Your research question is the alpha and the omega. It's the beginning of your thesis and it's the end, and it's the sole purpose of all your research. All other components of your, let's say, thesis serve the purpose of answering your research question, nothing more, nothing less. This applies to everything else. This applies to your literature review, where you read, where you have to decide what to read, right? This applies to your analytical framework, where you try to find out how you want to approach your search for data and information in order to answer your research question. It applies to the actual data you collect. Do they really fit? Are they really relevant? Are they necessary? Are they helpful to answer your research question? And then, of course, the analytical part where you do answer your research question, where you explain what your findings mean, and so on and so on. So the research question is really relevant for everything, for every single part of your research. A good research question can make this process relatively easy. Unfortunately, a badly chosen research question can make it very hard. So it's definitely important that you take your time and make a good decision. So what is a good research question? Well, first of all, and it sounds a bit obvious, but I nevertheless wanted to say it, a good research question exists in the first place. You need to have one. I've just gone through a very frustrating experience where I had to grade a PhD thesis where there was no research question. And I unfortunately had to tell the student that she will fail unless she completely rewrites the whole thing. So yes, it does happen. You have to have a research question. Just presenting interesting information is not enough. You also have to tell people why you do that, to what end, what the purpose is, what the target is, what you want to show, to demonstrate, to answer, to falsify, to confirm, whatever it is, right? A good research question is also something that a reader will find easily. Don't hide it. It happens sometimes that a research question is somewhere hidden in the middle of a long paragraph. The thing is, academic writing is a bit like a buyer's market as opposed to a seller's market. Most readers read your stuff voluntarily. And that means if they don't find it interesting, if they don't know what this is actually good for, they will stop reading. Okay, I'm a bit of an exception. As your professor, of course, I'm obliged to read your stuff, and I will, of course, invest some effort into finding your research question, even if you hide it. But nevertheless, it's always a good idea to make this as obvious as possible. You can have, for example, a section saying research question. You can highlight your research question in a separate paragraph. You can highlight your research question in italics or in bold script. It should definitely say, this is my research question. So don't keep your reader, including myself, guessing. A good research question appears early because that's what a reader, and I can definitely speak for myself, that's what I look for in the first place. If I read something, I want to know what this is all about, and I don't want to find out on page 20. I want to see that on page 1 in an ideal world. I want to know from the very beginning, aha, this is what he or she wants to do. And then everything else will, of course, be evaluated accordingly. A good research question fits the title or topic of your paper. So you shouldn't really write about two different things here. I already mentioned that division of labor, so a good research question kind of provides detail to the title. A good research question ends with a question mark, so it's an actual question. A good research question matters. It matters to you to keep you motivated, and it matters to others, which is something that, of course, you also have to demonstrate in the section on relevance of research question, which will come later in the structure of your paper. A good research question, again, obviously, but still I need to mention that, tells the reader what you want to find out. A good research question is feasible or doable, if you would like a different term. It needs to be answerable at all. Some questions cannot be answered, like, for example, what are the lottery numbers going to be 2 weeks from now? Unless there are some very unusual circumstances, that's a question that simply cannot be answered. And there are some questions that can be answered, but that you cannot answer, considering the fact that you have limited resources, that you also don't want to make endless investments into your term paper or master's thesis, right? So you have to make a smart choice. You have to be realistic and you have to be pragmatic. I know that many of you are really very ambitious and highly interested in a number of things. That's all perfectly fine, and I will be the last person to discourage you from answering a question that you find interesting. But you do not have to do this in the form of a term paper or a master's thesis. Be pragmatic. Remember that these two are components that will lead you towards graduation, which is a formal process. And of course, we want to unify this formal outcome with some satisfactory process and intellectual challenge and whatnot, but we need to do this in a realistic way. So if there's a question that you find really super interesting, but you discover that it might not be perfectly suitable as a research question for a term paper or master's thesis, that's not the end of the world. It just means that you need to answer it later differently in a different context. That's all. Okay, so don't be frustrated. Focus on pragmatism and on being realistic. A good research question is focused and narrow. It's not too broad. I will later talk about some frequently made mistakes, and very often students are a bit worried that they will not find enough information. So very often they go for a broader question out of fear that they will just run out of data. I've been doing this for many, many years now, if not decades, and I can assure you I have not seen this happening. Because once you start digging, once you start going into a particular topic, you will very quickly find out that it's typically much more than you have expected, and that there's much more information out there and available than you would have expected. So again, be focused and narrow instead of being too broad. A very important point is that you have to have one research question, one as in the number one, right? If you feel the need to ask different questions or to add sub-questions, my experience tells me that this is usually an expression of your own lack of a clear understanding of what you actually want to do. And it's interesting that you might not even be aware of that yourself. So I'm not saying that you're trying to play tricks on me here deliberately. I think it's a way to hide from yourself the fact that you still don't have absolute clarity. So in a way, it's a good test, a good self-check mechanism in a way. If you are not able to focus on one question only, if you feel you need to explain that by adding more questions or more sub-questions, then you actually might need to think harder about what you actually want to do. A good research question is easy to understand. You know the emperor's new clothes, you know this fairy tale where nobody really sees the emperor's clothes, but no one dares to speak up because they think, oh, it's me. I'm just, not intelligent enough to see that. Trust me, that's usually not how it works. Even the greatest minds, Nobel Prize winning economists, and so on, these people are able to write books that you and I can understand because they know what they do. Very often, if you have these highly unintelligible sentences, books, use of weird terminology, etc., very often this is just a tool to hide very little, actually, right? Um, so don't do that. Go for clearly understandable, easy research questions. Easy, not in the sense of easy to be done or shallow, but easy to understand, right? You can do that. There are many ways to classify research questions into clusters or types of research questions. There are dichotomous approaches, which means it's either or you have more multifaceted approaches here. All these types of questions that exist have their strengths and limitations. The ideal type of research question does not exist. It always really depends on context. Um, it will nevertheless help you to ask yourself, what type of question am I actually asking? It's part of this process of gaining more clarity in this internal dialogue with yourself on what is it that I actually want to do. Therefore, I also recommended here on the slide doing a little bit of a Google search, maybe for types of research questions. You will find lots of interesting stuff out there, YouTube videos, presentations by other professors, etc., etc. It will not necessarily help you to immediately find your ideal research question, but it will help you to get a bit more clarity and structure into your own thoughts and your own thinking. Most research questions will be of one or more of these basic types. One or more means that it's not like clear-cut separate categories here. They are very often are actually overlapping, but still, this kind of classification helps us to get some clarity. We have descriptive, comparative, explorative, and relational questions. And I'm going to say a few words on each of those categories on the next slides. So let's start with descriptive research questions. The challenge with such questions is that they are only relevant if the information you provide is new, which typically requires the production or discovery of primary data. For example, if you're a historian, you go to an archive and find material that no one else has worked on, then it might actually be extremely useful if you simply report about it so that other people will know, oh, there is this source of information and that's in it. You could conduct experiments and thereby generate your own data. This is being done a lot in psychology, for example, but also in political science, you can conduct surveys, for example. You can have interviews, you can have field studies. In sociology and anthropology, this happened a lot when people went to remote villages and studied, the life of people living there, etc., and then reported about it. So this is how a descriptive study can actually be of super high academic value, right? In any case, when you simply describe, like produce data, it doesn't mean that this needs to be of low quality in a structural sense. You have to find and present information in a structured, well-founded, and rigorous and complete way. So you have to discuss, even though you do not have really an analytical question at the end, you still have to discuss, okay, what am I looking for? Why am I looking for it? Which options exist? Which options have I chosen? Which have I discarded? How do I cluster data? If I find something on this or this, what does it mean? If I find nothing on this or that, what does that mean? So at the end of the day, before you go and start collecting this information, there's still theoretical work that needs to be done. All this is to demonstrate that you are the boss. You are the master of your data and not the other way around. Whatever you do is driven by what you search for. And this is how you find your data. And not by, okay, let's see what I find and then let's see what I can make out of this, right? Sometimes journalists work like this, and there's nothing wrong about it, but we are not journalism school here. So you have to have a structure and an idea before you go out and search for information. You do not read 10 books and then try to summarize them and then try to squeeze them into some research question that you haven't known before, okay? I think this should be pretty clear. Okay, comparative research questions. Well, as the name says, it's about comparing things, right? Comparing means you look for similarities and differences. That's all good. The only thing is you need to explain why you're doing that, right? What's the purpose, and what are the implications of your findings, right? Simply showing that, oh, I found similarities and differences, that's not enough. That's just half of the work. And you've done that before without probably being aware of it, but you have definitely done it. Whenever you make a decision between two or more things, you actually conduct a comparative analysis and you hopefully do that in a structured way. Like, for example, when you decided to enroll in the EcoS MA program, you must have considered other options, either other master's programs or just not continuing to study anymore, but rather get yourself a job or whatever other options there were at your table. So you compared options according to certain criteria, categories, and then you evaluated them according to some standards that you thought about and set for yourself, etc., etc. And the actual research question in that case was, which master's program is best for me? You might not even have asked that, but that's exactly what you did. And whenever you do a comparison, that's exactly what I will ask you to demonstrate, and not just, I want to compare this and that between Japan and South Korea. Then we have explorative and relational research questions. It's about reasons for particular actions or effects of particular actions. Um, you know that I typically warn my students about the pitfalls with this kind of questions, because causalities, and that's what we talk about here, right? A is the result of B, or B is the reason for A, or whatever. This is a causality, cause and effect, right? And these are extremely difficult to show, simply because most actions are not monocausal. You can show a correlation. That's hard enough, but it's possible. But correlation is not causation. Um, Whenever you get 1 year older, I get 1 year older as well, which is a correlation. But it is not in a causal relationship with anything, right? If I die and stop aging, then you will still get 1 year older, right? So demonstrating, oh, I got 1 year older, Professor Frank got 1 year older, there must be a correlation here, a causation here, that just is a non-starter. The problem is, if you look at two broad topics, if you look at societies, at macro issues, it's really almost impossible to demonstrate such a causality. There are exceptions. One exception is if you try to keep all other variables constant and only change the one variable you're interested in. Then a change in outcome might, with a good degree of certainty, be dependent on that particular variable that you have actually changed, which in other words means that you conduct an experiment in a laboratory. And that means that you have to have a very narrow research question. And instead of looking at two countries, you look at people from two different countries, or whatever it is, right? So an experiment in the laboratory is possible, but otherwise it will be really difficult. And that applies to these relational questions as well. One type of relational research question that I actually find very attractive is how does the situation of X in country A correspond to international standards for X? And now, of course, for X and country A, you can fill in the blanks depending on your particular interest. There are still challenges, but it's definitely doable, I would say. So I would encourage you to at least think about probably choosing a research question from that category. In addition, of course, you can offer new answers to old questions. So instead of finding your own research question, you can find somebody else's research question and say, okay, now I'm going to answer that. That happens a lot in mathematics, for example, where uh, scholars already know there is a set of unanswered questions, and then they might try one of those, and probably they will succeed, right? In social sciences, it's a bit harder, but it's doable. And you can also take the work of somebody and say, okay, and now I'm trying to show that this was wrong, and I'm going to do it right. Um, that is possible. In a way, it's a bit like a hypothesis that whether it can be verified or falsified. Remember, I will have a separate YouTube video on hypothesis, because this term is really used a lot in the wrong way. A hypothesis is an educated guess, right? It's an assumption that is based on existing knowledge. It's not just an assumption, a claim or something that comes out of nowhere. Usually, a hypothesis is the result of research, not the beginning. Or let's say it's the result of probably somebody else's research, and then you take that and say, okay, and this is a hypothesis I will now work with or something. But it means that you, of course, have to refer to that previously done work. Fighting a straw man is not a good idea. Like making up a hypothesis, saying that, well, you find that interestingly in Korea and China, I found this a lot. These claims like some scholars have said that this and this is, and I will now show that it is not. Unless you can really prove who these some scholars are, this is kind of useless, and you still also have to explain why it matters and so on. You might have noticed that we do accept descriptive research questions. That's a relatively new phenomenon. We accept these descriptive research questions because there is value in collecting high quality information in, and let me just repeat that, an academically rigorous and systematic way. Um, this value has always been there, but I think it's growing, and it has grown to a degree, and it will be growing even further to justify that we accept good descriptive research questions. Number one, access to information has become much easier. I'm of course talking about the internet, but also about cheaper flights, about a massive production of information, books, articles, reports, databases, etc., etc. Not just being accessible, but also being produced in the first place. So there's a lot of information there, and the ability to manage this huge amount of information becomes more and more crucial for actually making it useful. Um, from a more geopolitical perspective, the new Cold War does have an impact on us in area studies. I would call it a renaissance of descriptive research about countries and regions for very pragmatic and somewhat dark reasons. You need to know your enemy in order to fight him. Area studies, as such, does have a history in colonialism and imperialism, and also in the Cold War, the first Cold War after 1945. And since we are returning, if you are not already there, to another Cold War situation for the very same reasons, there will be a lot of interest in high quality information without necessarily having a too strong analytical focus here. And what's crucial is, of course, that all these stakeholders, being it businesses, diplomats, intelligence community, military, or whatnot, they are willing to pay for this kind of information. Pay with money, but they also pay with attention, with jobs, and so on and so on. So there's a demand, and as an economist, as a liberal economist, I'm strongly in favor for actually responding to an existing demand. Frankly, as a scholar, I still think it's down here at the bottom of the slide that understanding is and will be the gold standard always. But in a way, knowing or knowledge is also increasingly sought after. So I think there is value in accepting descriptive research questions, especially if you do not aspire to become a scholar, but if this is kind of the last stage of your academic career and then you want to move on into some kind of job in the job market outside of academia, then a descriptive research question will be perfectly fine. Okay, I have a few examples here. Let me again just let you read this for yourself, and I move on to the next slides. Yeah, we're almost at the end. I have a few other recommendations. The one point I just wanted to repeat because this really happens a lot. Do not pick a broad question out of fear of not finding enough data. Narrow down your research question. In some cases, it's important to try hard to remain objective and neutral. I have no problem with people who are driven by some values or ideology. It's just that it usually is not a good advisor for quality of your research if you're too engaged in something. And you should also be aware that some sources are produced with a certain bias, a certain value-based bias back in the mind of either the author or of the organization that sponsored these reports. So be careful here. Um, Something I observe a lot, unfortunately, is that some students keep changing their topic and research question. It's okay to start with something and then you discover a better idea, or you find out that it's actually not leading into the direction that you wanted. But don't do this more than once or twice at the maximum. I don't know whether it's appropriate to bring this comparison up, but in a way, it's like choosing your partner. You know, you marry and then you find out it was the wrong choice, then you get a divorce. But I don't know, if you had the 10th divorce, then probably people around you would start wondering whether there's something wrong with you. And it's not really very helpful, it's not very productive. So at some point, you really have to make a decision and to move on, really. Do not let yourself get confused by external advice. I know that sounds a bit weird because it's definitely helpful to ask others for their opinion, to get some outside opinion and so on. But if you do that too much, it will at some point stop being helpful, and it will start increasing your insecurity. Everyone has something else to say. I mean, come on, ask three people on what the best possible car is, and you will get five different opinions. And the same goes for your term paper, master's thesis, research questions, and topics. So at some point, it's okay. Until a certain point, it's okay to get external advice. At some point, you should stop doing that. Just don't listen anymore. Don't ask. Okay? Move on. Make a decision, a well-informed decision. Go for it. Um, it's always good to aim for the highest possible quality. There's no doubt about it. On the other hand, there is no perfect research project. Every scholar will tell you that, even the greatest ones. They will tell you that I wasn't quite sure and I always thought I should have probably added this or done that or something. Successful people also know when good enough is good enough. And as I keep emphasizing, a done something is better than a perfect nothing. That's a motto that you should really take to your heart. In terms of difficulty level, again, I know that many of you are very ambitious, and I strongly encourage that. But on the other hand, being successful sometimes means being pragmatic. For some reason, it's kind of negatively connotated if you pick the low-hanging fruit. I wonder why. You would be an idiot if you wouldn't pick the low-hanging fruit first, instead of ignoring it and trying to reach out for the harder to get stuff. So if you find a topic research question that's easy, take it. Be happy about it, right? You can pick the other fruits later, but go for the low-hanging fruit first. If there is anyone dangling in front of your nose, just be happy about it. Do not get lost in detail. There are some things that are listed here that are, of course, very important, but sometimes they are kind of a mechanism by which you fool yourself. You've heard about the term procrastination, right? If you're actually afraid of your own research project, your brain tells you, oh, but you need to really sit down in front of your computer and do something about this term paper. So you do it. Instead of actually doing research, reading something, writing something, you start playing around with all these nitty-gritty formalities. So at the end of the day, you can still tell yourself, "Hey, I've done something today." Be really careful. It happens to all of us, and there's nothing wrong, and it needs to be done anyway. But make sure that this does not become a habit. Really be honest to yourself and try to focus on the essential parts first. Um, it's very useful to find a question that you're actually interested in, simply because of self-motivation. especially for something like a master's thesis, which will keep you busy for a couple of weeks or months. It's helpful if you get some intrinsic motivation out of being interested in the research question yourself. Okay, my final remarks. A good topic or research question is the same as a good project, which helps us to extend the learnings from this beyond this narrow focus of academia, the university, or the EcoS MA program. Because sometimes you will get, wherever you work, the option to make choices, to choose. Let's say you sit at a table, 10 team members, the boss says, well, I have these 10 tasks here, and each of you choose one, and then you go for it. If you're able to recognize a good research question, which is nothing else but a good task, and you say, oh, I take task number 4, which is easy to do, which you know because you have kind of a trained eye, and you see, oh, there are difficult things here, I better take this one that's easy to do, then your professional success will depend on that. Or if you are self-employed or whatever, and you have different projects, different investments that you could probably make, different partners that you could choose, different products that you could probably try to develop, you also need to be able to distinguish between the good ones and the bad ones, right? Um, I have a few examples here that would probably help you to show what I actually mean. Also, finding a good topic and research question is a creative process. It's not something that is kind of manual labor where you just, if you invest enough time and effort, you will inevitably have an outcome. It's not like digging a hole or something. It's creative, and creativity cannot be forced. It's something that needs to be given an opportunity. So be aware that finding a good topic and research question will take time. Be aware that it will take a bit of inspiration as well. How can you improve the whole thing? By giving your brain, your creativity, a better chance to succeed. In other words, start early, get inspiration, and then your chances of finding a good topic and research question will be much, much bigger than saying, okay, today I have 2 hours to find a topic and research question. This is not very likely to be the best strategy. And then the last remark, I admit it's a bit esoteric, but only just a little bit. You learn something about yourself in the process. You will figure out how comfortable or uncomfortable you are with choosing your own task. Some of us are really uncomfortable. Some just like to be told what to do, even if they hate it. It still lets them sleep better at night, if you can hate your boss for having given you a stupid task. For some, it's like a limitation in their freedom if they are constantly told what to do. Some really love determining for themselves what to do, including all, of course, the burdens and risks that go with that. We are all different. So probably you already know what type of person you are. That's good. Probably you don't. In that case, this task of finding a good topic and research question, and then, of course, the subsequent job of writing that term paper or master's thesis will probably also teach you something about yourself. And the better you know yourself, the easier it will be for you to succeed in life. So my recommendation is to also take this as one of the learnings and outcomes of this process. Last but not least, here's our grading form. You get only 2 points for finding a good topic and research question. N is 2, right? So you get a maximum of 2 points, a minimum of 0. As I mentioned right at the beginning of this talk today, the thing is the follow-up effects will be relevant for all the other categories here as well. So it's not only 2 points, it's much more. But formally, it's only 2 points. And typically, if you and I have discussed your topic and research question before, which we do, and if I have okayed it, then these are 2 relatively safe points, unless you decide to go for a riskier game and just not consult me or ignore what I try to tell you, then it's not quite certain what the outcome will be. But again, the point is, it's not just these 2 points you get. Without a good topic and research question, you will not be able to explain the relevance, you will not have a good literature review, not have a good analytical framework, etc., etc., etc. So please remember, this is the most important part of your research that determines everything else that comes after that. I really hope that I was able to help you finding your way towards that goal, and I wish you to be successful. I wish you also to be probably even encouraged. I hope this will be a very fruitful and satisfying experience for you. Thank you for today, and I see you for the next topic.